The letter was gone. Ethan's heart sank as he rifled through the desk drawer, his fingers trembling over empty pages and stray pens, searching for the envelope he'd poured his soul into last night. He could still feel the weight of the words he'd written, each one a shard of truth he'd been too afraid to speak aloud for 19 years. He stood frozen in his bedroom, the walls of the small, neatly kept space in his father's Connecticut home closing in. The letter had been his lifeline, a confession to his father, David, about who he really was, a gay man, in love with his best friend, Lucas. He'd spent weeks crafting it, agonizing over every sentence, every plea for understanding. It was meant to be his freedom, his chance to finally live without the suffocating mask he'd worn since he was a kid. And now it was missing. Ethan's gaze darted to the window, where the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. His father's new wife, Margaret, had been in the house all morning, her saccharine smile and overly familiar hugs lingering in his mind. She'd called him her son at breakfast, her voice dripping with a warmth that felt too polished, too deliberate. Ethan had bristled at the words, though he'd hidden it behind a tight smile. Margaret had only been married to David for 6 months, but she'd already inserted herself into every corner of their lives, rearranging furniture, reorganizing routines, and, apparently, snooping through Ethan's things. He sank onto his bed, the mattress creaking under his weight. His mind raced, piecing together the timeline. He'd left the letter in the drawer last night, sealed in an envelope marked Dad. No one else had been in his room since. No one except Margaret, who'd come upstairs to check on him while he was at his part-time job at the local bookstore. The thought twisted in his gut like a knife. Had she read it? Destroyed it? The idea of her holding his truth, his raw, vulnerable confession, made his skin crawl. Downstairs, the front door creaked open, and his father's voice boomed through the house. "Ethan, you home?" David's tone was warm, oblivious to the storm brewing in his son's chest. Ethan forced himself to stand, wiping his clammy palms on his jeans. He couldn't confront Margaret yet, not without proof. But the suspicion gnawed at him, sharp and unrelenting. He descended the stairs, his sneakers soft against the hardwood. In the kitchen, Margaret was setting the table, her blonde hair pulled into a perfect bun, her smile as pristine as the white tablecloth. "There you are, sweetheart," she said, her voice honeyed. "Dinner's almost ready. Your dad's grilling steaks tonight." She reached out, brushing a hand against Ethan's arm, and he fought the urge to recoil. "Thanks," he muttered, his eyes scanning her face for any hint of guilt. If she'd taken the letter, she was hiding it well. Too well. David stepped in from the backyard, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his grin wide and unguarded. "Smells good out there." "Huh," he said, clapping Ethan on the back. "You look like you've seen a ghost, kid. Everything okay?" Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to blurt it out, to demand answers, to ask if Margaret had said anything about a letter. But the words stuck, trapped behind years of silence and fear. "Yeah," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and clinking silverware. Ethan barely touched his food, his mind replaying every moment he'd spent writing that letter. It had been his first step toward telling his father the truth about himself, about Lucas. Lucas, with his quiet laugh and hazel eyes, who'd been his best friend since sophomore year of high school. Lucas, who'd held his hand under the stars last summer and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. Not without you." After dinner, Ethan excused himself and slipped out to the park down the street, his phone buzzing with a text from Lucas. "Meet me at her spot?" The park was their sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves, away from prying eyes. Ethan grabbed his jacket and headed out, the cool September air biting at his skin. Lucas was already there, sitting on their bench by the lake, his dark hair catching the fading sunlight. He looked up as Ethan approached, his smile soft but tinged with concern. "You okay?" he asked, scooting over to make room. Ethan sat beside him, their shoulders brushing, and for a moment, the weight of the missing letter lifted. Lucas had that effect on him, always had. "It's gone," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The letter I wrote to my dad. I think Margaret took it." Lucas's eyes widened, his hand finding Ethan's and squeezing tight. "What? Are you sure?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, staring out at the lake. "But it was in my drawer last night, and now it's not. She was the only one in the house today." Lucas's jaw tightened, a rare flash of anger in his usually calm demeanor. "That's messed up, Ethan." "If she read it." He trailed off, but Ethan knew what he was thinking. If Margaret had read the letter, she knew everything. Ethan's love for Lucas, his fear of his father's rejection, his hope for acceptance. And if she destroyed it, she'd stolen more than just paper. She'd stolen his courage. "We'll figure it out," Lucas said, his voice steady. "We'll write another one. Or you can tell him in person. Whatever you want, I'm here. Ethan leaned into him, their hands still clasped, the warmth of Lucas's touch grounding him. I just want to be honest, he said. I'm so tired of hiding. Lucas turned to face him, his eyes fierce with conviction. Then don't. We'll do this together. No matter what. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a soft golden glow, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Margaret might have taken his letter, but she couldn't take his truth. Not anymore. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Margaret humming in the kitchen, her voice carrying a cheerful tune that grated against his nerves. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the previous day replaying in his mind. The missing letter felt like a betrayal, a violation of the fragile trust he'd been building to come out to his father. He couldn't shake the image of Margaret's manicured hands rifling through his desk, her eyes scanning his words, judging him in silence. He forced himself out of bed, pulling on a hoodie and jeans. Downstairs, Margaret was arranging a platter of pancakes, her smile as bright as the morning sun streaming through the windows. Good morning, Ethan, she chirped, setting a plate in front of him. I made your favorite, blueberry. Thought it'd cheer you up. Ethan's stomach churned. Her kindness felt like a mask, a performance to cover whatever she'd done. Thanks, he said, his voice flat, avoiding her gaze as he picked at the food. David was already at the table, reading the morning paper, oblivious to the tension simmering between his son and his new wife. Big day today, David said, folding the paper. I've got a meeting with the contractors, but how about we hit the driving range this afternoon, Ethan? Just you and me. Ethan's heart skipped. Time alone with his dad was rare these days, with Margaret always hovering. It could be his chance to talk, to say what he'd written in the letter, if he could find the courage. Sure, he said, managing a nod. Sounds good. Margaret's smile didn't falter, but Ethan caught a flicker in her eyes, a moment of calculation that sent a chill down his spine. Did she know he suspected her? Was she waiting for him to slip up, to reveal something she could use against him? At the bookstore that afternoon, Ethan's mind was elsewhere as he shelved novels, his hands moving on autopilot. Lucas stopped by during his lunch break, his presence a welcome distraction. They slipped into the back room, surrounded by stacks of unsorted books, and Lucas pulled him into a quick, reassuring hug. Any news on the letter? He asked, his voice low. Nothing, Ethan said, frustration bubbling up. I checked my room again this morning. It's not there. I even looked in the trash cans, but he shook his head, the weight of defeat settling in. What if she burned it or something? Lucas frowned, his brow furrowing. We need to know for sure. Maybe we can check her stuff. Her desk, her purse, something. Ethan hesitated. Snooping felt wrong, a line he wasn't sure he could cross. But the thought of Margaret holding his secret, possibly using it to manipulate him or his father, pushed him toward action. Okay, he said finally. But we have to be careful. If she catches us, we won't get caught, Lucas said, his tone firm. Tonight, when they're out for their date night, I'll come over, and we'll look together. The plan was risky, but Ethan nodded, a surge of determination replacing his fear. He couldn't let Margaret control his truth, not when he was so close to breaking free. That evening, as David and Margaret left for their weekly dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown, Ethan waited until their car disappeared around the corner before texting Lucas. They're gone. Come now. His heart pounded as he paced the living room, the house eerily quiet without Margaret's humming or David's booming laugh. Lucas arrived 10 minutes later, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his expression all business. Where do we start? He asked, stepping inside. Her office, Ethan said, leading the way upstairs. Margaret had claimed the spare room as her workspace, a pristine space with a sleek desk, neatly organized files, and a faint scent of lavender. Ethan's hands shook as he opened the top drawer, revealing pens, notepads, and a stack of unopened mail. Nothing out of the ordinary. Lucas checked the bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines of self-help books and decorating magazines. Anything in here looks suspicious? He asked, glancing over his shoulder. Ethan shook his head, moving to the filing cabinet. Most of the folders were labeled with mundane titles, bills, receipts, wedding plans. But then he saw it, a plain manila folder tucked at the back, unlabeled. His pulse quickened as he pulled it out and opened it, revealing a single sheet of paper. His letter, creased but intact, the envelope torn open. Oh my God, Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. Lucas was at his side in an instant, peering over his shoulder. The sight of his own handwriting, the words he'd labored over, felt like a punch to the chest. Margaret had taken it. She'd read it, and she'd hidden here like a trophy. What do we do now? Lucas asked, his hand resting on Ethan's shoulder, grounding him. Ethan's mind raced. Confronting her was tempting, but dangerous. If she was capable of this, what else might she do to keep his secret buried? We take it back, he said, his voice steadier than he felt, and we figure out why she's hiding it. As they slipped the letter into Lucas's backpack and left the office, Ethan's resolve hardened. Margaret might think she'd won, but this was only the beginning. He'd tell his father the truth, no matter what it took. The letter burned a hole in Ethan's pocket as he sat across from his father at the driving range, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the green. David swung his club with practiced ease, oblivious to the storm raging in Ethan's mind. The recovered letter, now safely tucked in his jacket, felt like both a weapon and a shield, a reminder of Margaret's betrayal and a chance to reclaim his truth. "Nice form, Dad," Ethan said, forcing a smile as David's ball sailed down the range. He'd been waiting for the right moment to talk, but every time he opened his mouth, the words caught in his throat. What if his father didn't understand? What if Margaret had already poisoned him against the idea? David chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're up, kid. Show me what you've got." He handed Ethan a club, his eyes warm with the easy camaraderie they'd always shared. It was moments like this that made Ethan ache for the days before Margaret, when it was just him and his dad against the world. Ethan took a swing, the ball veering left, and David laughed. "Gotta keep your eye on the ball, not your head in the clouds." He paused, studying Ethan's face. "You sure you're okay? You've been quiet all day." The question hung in the air, heavy with opportunity. Ethan's fingers brushed the letter in his pocket, his heart pounding. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you," he started, but his voice faltered as his phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Margaret's home early. Be careful." Ethan's stomach dropped. If Margaret was back, she might notice the letter was gone. He needed to act fast, but the driving range wasn't the place for this conversation, not with time ticking against him. "Can we talk later?" he said, hating the cowardice in his voice. "At home." David frowned but nodded. "Sure, kid. Whatever you need." Back at the house, Margaret was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a precision that felt almost menacing. "You boys have fun?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp, locking onto Ethan's like she could see right through him. "Yeah," Ethan said, avoiding her gaze as he headed upstairs. Lucas was waiting in his room, his expression tense. "She didn't say anything," Lucas whispered, "but she's acting weird, like she knows something's up." Ethan pulled the letter from his pocket, his hands shaking. "I was going to give it to him today, but I chickened out. And now she's here." And he trailed off, frustration choking him. What if she tells him first? What if she twists it? Lucas sat beside him, their knees touching. "She won't. We've got the letter now. You're in control." But Ethan didn't feel in control. The weight of Margaret's secret loomed over him, a shadow he couldn't shake. Why had she taken the letter? Was she protecting David, or herself? Or was it something darker, a need to control the narrative, to keep Ethan in his place? That night, as Ethan lay awake, his phone lit up with a call from Lucas. "I did some digging," Lucas said, his voice low. "I looked up Margaret online. She's got a history, nothing major, but there's stuff about her being super involved in her church. Like traditional family values stuff. Anti-gay stuff." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You think she'd try to out me? Or keep me from coming out?" "I don't know," Lucas admitted. "But we need to be ready. You should tell your dad soon, before she can spin it her way." The next day, Ethan steeled himself for the conversation. He chose the living room, neutral ground, and asked David to sit with him after breakfast. Margaret was out running errands, giving them a rare moment alone. Ethan's hands trembled as he pulled the letter from his pocket, its edges worn from being handled so much. "Dad," he began, his voice shaking. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you. It's about who I am." He handed David the letter, watching his father's face for any sign of judgment. David's brow furrowed as he read, his eyes scanning the page. The silence stretched, unbearable, until he finally looked up. "Ethan," he said, his voice thick, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" Tears stung Ethan's eyes. "I was scared. I didn't know if you'd accept me." David pulled him into a hug, strong and unwavering. "You're my son," he said fiercely. "Nothing changes that. I love you no matter what." For the first time in months, Ethan felt like he could breathe. But as they pulled apart, the front door opened, and Margaret's voice called out, "I'm home." The moment shattered, and Ethan realized the real battle was just beginning. Margaret's heels clicked against the hardwood as she entered the living room, her smile faltering when she saw Ethan and David sitting close, the letter still in David's hand. Ethan's heart raced, his father's acceptance still warm in his chest, but the sight of Margaret brought a fresh wave of dread. She knew. She had to know the letter was gone. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light, but laced with something Ethan couldn't quite place. Caution, perhaps, or defiance. She set her purse on the coffee table, her eyes flicking to the letter before settling on David. David stood, holding the letter like a shield. "Margaret, we need to talk," he said, his tone steady but firm. Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't expected his father to confront her so soon, but the fire in David's eyes told him this wasn't just about the letter. It was about trust. Margaret's smile tightened. "About what, honey?" she asked, tilting her head, her voice syrupy sweet. David held up the letter. "This, Ethan's letter to me, the one you took from his room." The air in the room turned to ice. Margaret's eyes widened, just for a moment, before she recovered, her expression shifting to one of feigned confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Why would I take something of Ethan's?" Ethan's fists clenched. "It was in your office," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "In a folder hidden away. You read it, didn't you?" Margaret's gaze darted between them, her composure cracking. "Ethan, sweetheart, I'd never invade your privacy like that. Maybe you misplaced it." "Stop," David cut in, his voice sharp. "Don't lie to me, Margaret. You took it, and you hid it." "What?" For a moment, Margaret said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping as if admitting defeat. "Fine," she said, her voice low. "I found the letter. I didn't mean to read it, but I saw my name on the envelope, and I was curious." Ethan's stomach twisted. The envelope had been marked Dad, not her name. She was lying again, and the realization fueled his anger. "You had no right," he said, stepping forward. "That was mine. My truth." Margaret's eyes flashed, a hint of defiance returning. "I was trying to protect this family," she said. "David, you've been under so much stress with work, and I didn't want to add to it. I thought I could handle it. Talk to Ethan first. Make sure he was ready." "Ready?" Ethan snapped. "You mean ready to stay quiet? To keep hiding who I am?" David's face darkened, his hand tightening around the letter. "Margaret, you don't get to decide what Ethan shares with me. He's my son. This was his to tell, not yours to control." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but Ethan couldn't tell if they were genuine or another performance. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I just wanted us to be a family. I thought I was doing the right thing." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Ethan wanted to believe her, to think her actions came from a place of care, but the sting of her betrayal was too raw. She'd read his heart, his fears, his love for Lucas, and instead of supporting him, she'd tried to bury it. David turned to Ethan, his expression softening. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice steady. "For being honest. For being you. We'll figure this out, okay? Together." Ethan nodded, tears spilling over. But as he glanced at Margaret, he saw something in her eyes, a flicker of resentment, quickly masked. She wasn't done, he realized. Not yet. That night, Ethan met Lucas at the park again, the letter now safely back in his possession, his father's acceptance a lifeline he hadn't expected. He told Lucas everything, the words tumbling out as they sat by the lake, the moonlight casting their shadows across the water. "She's not going to let this go," Ethan said, his voice low. "She's going to try something else. I can feel it." Lucas took his hand, his grip firm. "Let her try. You've got your dad now, and you've got me. We're stronger than her." Ethan leaned into him, the warmth of Lucas's presence easing the ache in his chest. For the first time, he felt like he could face whatever came next. But deep down, he knew Margaret's shadow still loomed, and the fight for his truth was far from over. The days that followed were a delicate dance of tension and hope. David's acceptance had changed everything for Ethan, lifting a weight he'd carried for years. But Margaret's presence in the house was a constant reminder of her betrayal. She was quieter now, her smiles less frequent, her interactions with Ethan careful and measured. But Ethan wasn't fooled. He saw the way her eyes lingered on him, calculating, as if she were waiting for an opportunity to regain control. One evening, as Ethan helped David with the dishes, his father broke the silence. "I've been thinking," David said, his hands submerged in soapy water, "about what happened with Margaret. I'm going to talk to her, really talk about boundaries. She needs to understand that you're my priority." Ethan's heart swelled, but the fear lingered. "What if she doesn't get it?" he asked. "What if she tries to, I don't know, sabotage us?" David's jaw tightened. "She won't. I won't let her. You're my son, Ethan. That's forever." The conversation gave Ethan strength, but it also deepened his resolve to protect his truth. He and Lucas began spending more time together, openly, no longer hiding their affection in public. They held hands at the park, shared quiet moments at the bookstore, and planned a future where they could live without fear. Each moment felt like a defiance of Margaret's attempt to silence him. But Margaret wasn't done. A week later, Ethan came home to find her in the living room, a stack of papers on the coffee table. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Ethan, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with purpose. He hesitated, his instincts screaming to walk away, but curiosity pulled him forward. "What's this about?" he asked, sitting across from her. Margaret pushed the papers toward him. "I found these in the attic," she said. "Old letters, photos, things from your dad's past. I thought you might want to see them." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The papers were innocuous, old birthday cards, a few faded photos of him and David from years ago. But something about the gesture felt off, like a distraction. "Why now?" he asked, his voice sharp. Margaret sighed, folding her hands in her lap. "I know I messed up, Ethan. I shouldn't have taken your letter. I want us to be a family. I thought maybe these would help you see that I'm trying." Her words sounded sincere, but Ethan's gut told him otherwise. He took the papers, murmuring a thanks, but as he left the room, he noticed her watching him, her eyes sharp with intent. That night, he showed the papers to Lucas, who frowned as he flipped through them. "This feels like a setup," Lucas said. "Like she's trying to shift focus, make you doubt yourself." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't let her manipulate him again. The next day, he confronted her, the papers in hand. "I don't need these," he said, his voice steady. "I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to respect me." Margaret's face fell, but she nodded, her lips tight. "I understand," she said, but Ethan didn't trust her words. He knew she'd try again, in some other way, to control the narrative. Months later, Ethan and Lucas stood together at the park, the same bench where they'd shared so many moments. David was there too, a proud smile on his face as he watched them, his acceptance unwavering. Margaret was still in their lives, but her influence had waned. Her attempts to interfere met with firm boundaries from both Ethan and David. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the lake, Ethan took Lucas's hand, his heart full. He'd fought for his truth, for his love, and he'd won. Not just his father's acceptance, but his own. The letter, once a symbol of fear, was now a testament to his courage, a reminder that no one could erase who he was. And as they walked away, hand in hand, Ethan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he'd face them with Lucas by his side, their love a light that no shadow could dim.